Every once in a while, we get to meet up with our heroes and heroines in 3D. And last week, I had the distinct pleasure of being able to sit down with the incredible Dr. Arielle Schwartz. And we dug deep into my new book, Keep Breathing, and also exploring the nuances and the powerful opportunities in the construct called post-traumatic growth. While, of course, exploring the wonderful gifts of her book, the Post-Traumatic Growth Guidebook. How can we lean into the difficulties of our past to arise stronger and wiser and even more powerful than before? So join me now as we go to a 3D experience and connect with Arielle in Washington, D.C.
Happy to be sitting here with you. Likewise. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for reading it and endorsing it. So grateful. And so I know I told you this story already, but I sat down to read your book, and then I couldn't move off the couch. And I read it from cover to cover in one sitting because it's compelling and it's powerful and it's brave.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that with me.
Yeah.
And that just, it made my heart sing when you showed that. And there's one goal we have with the book, right now. And I feel I've had that, my own version of that with so many of your books, except for I am moving off the couch because I'm doing the exercises with it.
Exactly. But, I think that, my work with post-traumatic growth, what brings that home is the memoir, is the stories of really seeing the arc of going through the unimaginable and then being able to follow that all the way through into what is possible. And you live that, you share that. Before reading your book, this book, I'd read your other one, I didn't know any of this about you, and I'm sure that no one at face value or just meeting you, but the cover of the book, no one would know what you've been through. And I don't know if you want to say a little bit about what the book is about here.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of a keynote yesterday here at Symposium with Everybody's Got a Caption in the Cleveland Clinic video. We don't know what's behind the eyes of every person. And one of the things that really inspired me to write this book was to highlight how human we all are, and that even as experts sitting in this space, we're supposed to know all the things. It doesn't matter what we know when we're in the throes of deep trauma. And so the book opens up with me giving the eulogy at my fiance's funeral. And even that is an interesting conundrum because we already had a marriage certificate. We were to be married in a week. We'd been together for 10 years. And he passed away. And that was shocking, obviously. I developed PTSD from that experience, traumatic grief. Now we have a diagnosis called prolonged grief disorder. And so some might say that it was some iteration of that, but really it was trauma compounded by a lifetime of severe chronic illness and anxiety and bullying. And we know how life can pile on, and it piles on in the brain. Right. And when all of that happened, it broke open, and that's what the book is all about. But it's a love story. Yeah, it's a post-traumatic growth story.
It's a post-traumatic growth story, for sure. It's a heroine's journey story, and really embodying the courage that it takes to go through something that hard and to bump up against what can feel so hopeless. One of the parts of your book that really touched me was actually the story about the bad therapist.
And it was so scary to write that. It was so scary to write that.
Yeah, no. But it's such an important part of the story. It's so important for that to be known that, sometimes we think, okay, I'm finally going to do the thing. I'm finally going to go to therapy, and it doesn't feel right or it doesn't feel good. And then we think, well, they must know what they're doing. They must, they've trained for this, but why does it feel bad? Why does something feel wrong? Why is this
what they're supposed to do in therapy? I think it's one of the lines in that section.
Right. And so, to expose that if it doesn't feel right, something's wrong.
Yeah. And listening to that intuition, and especially as trauma survivors, and I know you've shared a little bit in some of your books about your own journey, and you have a case study in your new book where you talk about going into therapy and the therapist simply saying, just like, oh, yeah, and how beautiful and poignant that was to have the therapist see you in that moment. But I think that's the hope we all have when we begin the therapeutic journey is here's somebody who's going to see us, attune to us, and really help us. And that hope, as survivors who've been denied the trust in our own bodies, can be worked. And in that moment when therapist acts, and I did redact the name, I would never, because she didn't mean to do harm. And that's the thing that I think is so important as therapists is we're not ill-intentioned. We come to this from such deep spaces of care. And if we're not in our scope of practice, if we're not being mindful of the clients that we're seeing and that we have the tools to assist them, it's not a fit. But also, a big part of that story was she was overburdened. And she didn't have the resources to sit with me. I didn't know that at the time. I found that out later.
Right, because she had gone through her own
recent, very recent loss, and was still seeing clients.
Yes.
And
it's also a caution for us as therapists to ensure that we are really, really staying honest with our own self-care all along the way. And I feel like half of my work ends up being how to take care around vicarious traumatization and to ensure that our nervous systems are in the right zone so that we can really show up for others.
Yeah.
It's also what I love about self-havening practices or nervous system care practices and vagal toning is that I'm doing them right along with my clients. So we are actually taking care of our nervous systems together.
Yeah, I know. Which is so powerful. And building our own growth and our own resilience and both the healers, but really the partners. As we are the models for the work. And I think there's a really important part of that self-awareness. And in the journey with Keep Breathing, I talk about how I left clinical practice. Yeah. My PTSD was so severe, I couldn't see clients. I didn't trust my brain. And I don't know if I would have done that having not had that experience with therapists. There's a little growth story where absolutely, and gratitude, too, which is like why it's like I'm not going to, and the struggle to put that story in, and it really broke my brain open, and then there was just the title, like trauma, and it wasn't just the trauma from the loss of finding my fiance and not being able to say that. It was as though all of the childhood trauma, all of the experiences just flooded. And that's a big data point that I don't bring people.
Yes. I think it's also profoundly common. I mean, I found this for myself, and I found this in working with others, is that there can be the recent traumatic event. For me, it came through the gates of a car accident. Mm-hmm. Car accident happens, and all of a sudden, what I'm working through in my own EMDR therapy was through that access point of the car accident, my own childhood trauma came to the surface. And that, it's one of the things that we learn to trust as trauma-informed practitioners, that the psyche will actually take you where it needs to go in order to heal. But of course, we need the right support.
Yes. Which includes all of the tools. Yeah. All of the embodiment, all of the tools that we do, because that's such a critical part of the support is our brain and our body trusting that we have the resources available to follow where the system needs to go. And as practitioners, for us to know that our clients have access to that. Yes. That was a big part of the Keep Breathing title. It's just like a gentle reminder, breathe, that. And even to myself, I'm a bad breather. It's like, just breathe.
One of the other parts of your book that really struck me was about your story with chronic illness and the way that your illness came or partnered with that trauma response and was an essential part. And I feel like it's another piece that we're just starting to understand is that trauma health connection. And even though we get it from the perspective of developmental trauma and where those origins, come about, but I think really to understand that there are these tipping points where everything just comes out, to the surface and says, now is the time this needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Well, and within that story and my car accident, right? Yeah, the different version of that and the experience of having the lack that there was an officer at the scene, but then the medical trauma that followed and not knowing what was happening, but just something I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't live, my brain giving up.
Yes.
And how scary that was. And yet being able to do those micro practices, the vagal tuning, being able to, I'm just going to hum, and just tiny little things before I knew evening, obviously. Right. So much of that work and so much of your work. Yes.
It also relates me that when we can track a story from trauma through to resilience all the way to post-traumatic growth, we also have that ability to cultivate vicarious resilience, right? Like if she could do it, maybe I could do it too.
And if you gave thumbs up for me, well, like that is your work.
I
think of the Phoenix journey. I talk about that quite a bit in the book, of flying into the flames, burning,
being thrown into them. Yeah, being thrown into them over and over again.
And arising, look stronger. And I'll never forget the moment I found out that a group of phoenixes is called an odyssey. Oh, yeah. Wow, that's right. For being a part of my odyssey. Thank you. You should be beautiful. It was